What's up, everyone? We're here for post-game Locked On Bucks. Frank is up late again. What a great man he is. He even put up with my computer freezing here for 10 minutes, but he had to do it because the Bucks just beat the Sacramento Kings. This was an exciting finish. It was probably closer late in the fourth quarter than you would have been hoping for if you're a Bucks fan, but they're the champs. They closed the game out. They've been winning close games of late. We're going to discuss how they did it. Frank was just tweeting some defensive numbers, which I didn't get a chance to really look into, but I'm curious about. So there's plenty to talk about. The Stars were big down the stretch, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. And joining me, the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. Just minutes after the Bucks beat the Kings, 135-126. It was a high-scoring game. The Bucks have had plenty of high-scoring games against the Kings in recent years. It should be said. Before we get into it, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day, whether it's in the audio version, whether it's on YouTube, where we have just flown by 2.5K subs, Frank. People are enjoying looking at us on YouTube, which is very bizarre. But hey, shout out to everyone on YouTube that wants to put themselves through that. We absolutely respect that. We love that. We also love this fourth quarter here. The Bucks finished the game on a 9-0 run. There was a series of big shots from both of these teams up until the Bucks were able to get a couple stops, force a couple turnovers from De'Aaron Fox, and ultimately close out this game. You can start wherever you want, Frank, but I will just say this was the classic, and I do want to shout out Paul Presti25 on Twitter who tweeted this out because he was exactly right. I was watching this game halfway through the fourth quarter. The Kings are going crazy. The fans are going nuts. They've had a long season, but this would be a big win for them. And I was looking at the Bucks players and not a smile, no look of concern. They're just like, whatever. We'll probably close this game out. And they did. It's not always easy. Sometimes on a road trip against these teams that aren't having, great seasons and get excited for a potential big win on their behalf. But the champs closed them out. And it is the latest in a number of games where they've been able to get the job done late in the fourth quarter, which is perhaps the more important point.
Yeah, I think a recurring theme we've been seeing here for a little while is, especially against a team that maybe isn't the strongest, or a team that you expect to, that you're gonna have to really dig deep to beat, like the Kings. Do the Bucks feel like they can just go out and kind of just outscore them? Yeah, I think they kind of do. And do they feel like, hey, if we just really need to buckle down late, do you think we can do that? Yeah, we'll play defense late if we have to, but we'll kind of pace ourselves throughout the rest of the game. I think that's been their MO for a little while. And again, that's not obviously the style that you're going to want to take to the playoffs, but as far as managing your way through a regular season, yeah, you can get away with it, especially when you execute down the stretch on both ends. And that's something that we've been seeing now repeatedly. And it's been really the recurring theme here since the two games that they lost to Philly and Brooklyn, which were characterized by not executing down the stretch. They have been phenomenal down the stretch of all the games since then. And obviously the only game they lost was the blowout against the Warriors. But other than that, I mean, for the most part, they've been playing good teams. They've had to actually play well in fourth quarters. And thankfully the fourth quarter has been a very different story than the third quarter of late. And, Jrue Holiday was the one guy of the big three who was not having a big scoring night. And he comes in and hits a couple of really big threes that the Bucks went down by 3 on a handful of occasions in the fourth quarter, and it seemed like whenever they did, Jrue Holiday was just like, all right, I'm just going to pull up for a 3-pointer and bury it. And we even saw Wes Matthews, another couple threes tonight, 8 points plus 6. He was again a key guy in crunch time, 3 steals. As the Bucks, I thought, did a nice job of kind of mixing things up, showing some extra bodies, the Kings, putting them in some bad spots and forcing turnovers late, which it's not really the Bucks calling card, forcing turnovers, but they've got obviously versatile defenders that they can go to in this closing lineup. And on a night when Giannis goes for 36, Khris goes for 32 points on 20 shots, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, and Jrue also hits 50% from the field and tops 20 points, whatever you have, like 21, I think. And you shoot 18 of 35 from 3. Yeah, you should win that game. You score 135 points. Definitely was closer than you would have liked. And I definitely had some nervous moments there in the fourth quarter. Throughout the first, call it 40 some minutes of the game, I was feeling like, they'll get it. They'll figure it out. I wasn't that nervous. But once again, a little bit too much playing with their food probably. And, but again, superstars delivered. The superstar delivered, the stars supported in the way that was needed. And once again, you closed out a team that you're supposed to beat down the stretch. And, again, I hesitate to call that like a great win, but to me, all road wins, especially when you're on one of these West Coast trips, you don't ask too many questions about how you get them. You just take them and you bank them. And now you're moved to 2-1 on the road trip. You've got a couple days off before facing the Timberwolves, who obviously have already beaten you once this year and are having a very good season, on Saturday to close out the road trip in an afternoon game. So, hey, they can enjoy. I don't know where they're going. I assume they're probably staying the night in Sacramento. They can go to Dante DiVincenzo's apartment. Have a good time, kind of relax a little bit, and not. Let's just say it probably would have been a longer couple of days if they had managed to somehow drop this game, given the way they played for a lot of those first three quarters. But again, grinding out another win, move to 44-26, and if they can win the next two games, they would actually match the record that they had last year, which I would say 10 games ago, did not seem like a very likely thing to be hitting when they were, I think, 35-25 or 36-25. But obviously, they've turned things around pretty well since then. And again, just keep on keeping on.
18 games over 500 almost feels hard to believe, just based on it's kind of been obviously a roller coaster season. And yes, if you go on a stretch like this, your record will start to look pretty good. But 18 games over 500 again is crazy. And based on, and I don't know this for sure, but I think you're right, based on the travel schedule that certainly the Bucks would try and follow when I was over there, I think they might choose to have at least a half a day of sunshine. Who knows? Maybe some pool time tomorrow morning before they head to Minnesota. I think that would be absolutely right, which means that our friend Mitchell Maurer, who was at the game with his son Ollie, maybe tomorrow morning, if they go out for breakfast, you never know. You could run into Giannis on the streets of Sacramento. So shout out to Mitchell, and most importantly, shout out to Ollie for his first live basketball game, undefeated, seeing the Bucks in person. So shout out to those guys. Jrue Holiday, you mentioned, wasn't the probably the fourth quarter performance that he's had perhaps more frequently in the last couple of weeks, but he still scored 11 points in the fourth quarter, and he just continues to do that. And that's how he got to the 21. Overall, 89 points they got from Giannis, Khris, and Jrue. So, they've been really leaning on these guys heavily. But I do want to, you already mentioned Wes Matthews, but I do want to shout out the bench a little bit because it has been a talking point through the season. Well, the Bucks aren't getting much offense from the reserves, worst in the league. They have been 29-30 for most of the season. But Marcus Johnson mentioned it during the broadcast. There was a stretch there where Giannis was getting a breather in the fourth quarter. And it's like, all right, well, we're just going to put Brook Lopez out on the floor and Bobby Portis is going to go out with him. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, this starts to look like a playoff rotation. Brook obviously came off the bench, played his 15 minutes again in this one, but you got 8 points from Wes, 8 from Serge, and even George Hill coming in and playing some of those minutes as well. And all of a sudden, again, hopefully it's the case. We got an update today that Pat Connaughton is probably about a week away there or so. So he'll probably get 7-8 games in before the postseason as well. So everything just starting to look a little more normal, a little more playoff-like, which is fun. It's good to see. It's nice when you have this rotation where even the bench units, you're like, okay, this is a solid squad. This is what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, and I mean, Bud's going to have some interesting decisions once Pat is back because I feel like right now he's got 10 guys that he likes. We saw as far as that, we talked a lot about the big rotation. Tonight we saw Bobby go to the bench, I think around like the 7 or 8 minute mark of the first quarter so that they could sort of start to stagger Serge and Brook and not have Bobby and Giannis, overlapping too much because you can't play the other two guys together. In the third quarter, we saw Giannis go to the bench with 7 minutes left and then come back a few minutes later and go on a big run. So interesting kind of hint at how they might try to kind of force and kind of move those pieces around. I still think, you'd expect to see Brook back in the starting lineup sooner rather than later, but an interesting kind of look into that. And then, obviously Javon Carter has earned his minutes. I'd say Davion Mitchell was the better sort of small defensive point guard tonight. He was really good for the Kings, and Dante was also really good. And had, I think Khris was joking that he almost had his revenge game tonight. Even made a layup for a 3-point play in the fourth quarter, which felt like, oh man, things are really kind of going against the Bucks. But obviously Carter has earned minutes, and Wes Matthews, as I said before, actually maybe kind of, sort of, possibly rediscovering his 3-point shooting stroke a little bit. Finally seeing some of those go down, and the defense has been there throughout here over the past few months. So he's definitely a guy that I think you feel good about having as part of that closing group. So we know Pat Connaughton's going to play. Where do those minutes come from? You just brought George Hill back. I would say probably Javon Carter is the guy who's going to see his minutes cut into. Also, are you really going to play, those 4 big guys throughout the rest of the regular season? I mean, you gave up real value. I mean, you gave up Dante, who you valued. And again, I know you got a couple picks and you shed some salary along with those 2 roster spots to get him, but you added a ton. I mean, Bucks added a ton. I think it was like $9-10 million. I'd have to double check in terms of total outlay at the end of the season because of his incremental salary and the tax implications. That you're paying a ton of money in addition to the value to have Serge Ibaka on this team. I mean, kind of like we were saying, we didn't really think they were going to use that Dante chip for a center because we just didn't know if that guy was even going to play once hopefully Brook came back. And again, of course, he is still Brook insurance in case something happens with Brook. But, again, it puts them in a really interesting spot because are there going to be minutes for Serge Ibaka when Pat Connaughton comes back? Is Javon Carter the guy who's not going to play? Is George Hill just not going to play? I don't know. I have a hard time seeing George Hill just not playing. So some very interesting decisions that are going to have to be made. But hey, we've been seeing the Bucks deal with injuries all season. I will happily take the opposite problem of having to find minutes for guys. Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed, right? Hopefully, again, I have a wood table here. I hate to start, kind of counting the chickens before they hatch, but definitely something to watch. And I think right now you feel pretty good about the group that you have. And I don't really look at anybody that they're playing right now as like, oh, just got to survive these minutes with so-and-so on the floor, right? I mean, I think you've got a really solid, top 10 right now, especially from a regular season perspective.
No, I think that's right. And I think overall, we are all just happy that the Bucks are healthy. But I like being healthy off the court as well and away from the podcast, Mike Frank, which is why our next partner has a product that I use literally every day, and that's Athletic Greens. And you might be wondering, what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens to help you start your day right. The special blend of ingredients support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, and aging are all the things you need if you're a basketball fan and the Bucks are playing on the West Coast. So, Athletic Greens, some of the things that you need to know about that. It costs less than $3 a day if you're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than that cold brew habit that you've got. There's no doubt about that. I know it was a stinking hot day in Milwaukee today, so maybe you were having the cold brew. You should be having Athletic Greens instead. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. To make it easy, Athletic Greens has given you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NBA network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NBA network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Make sure you check out the Locked On Now podcast as well. You can get a recap of the night's play. There was plenty of drama in the T-Wolves and Lakers game. So you can catch up with all of that on the Locked On Now podcast. You mentioned Dante DiVincenzo, and we should just briefly give him a shout out. He did have 19 points in this game. And I do think that we got the full Dante experience in this game. He started by having an interception, a steal, went the other way. I'm like, okay, well, that's fitting that was his first real impact in the game. Knocked down threes. We know he can be a streaky shooter. He did have that and one, but he also missed another layup right at the rim. And then at a crucial point in the fourth quarter, he dribbled the ball off his own foot and turned the ball over. So, look, everyone knows I mentioned this in yesterday's podcast. I like Dante. I want him to do well, but there's no doubt the full Dante experience there tonight against the Bucks. The interesting thing about this game, and Giannis really went for a stretch where he was just like, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm going to try and put this game away. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't actually able to happen, but he took over. He was getting to the rim. Sacramento were getting very, very, very frustrated with some of the calls in this game. The interesting thing is that Giannis had 16 free throws, but Sabonis had 13 of his own. So he spent the night at the free throw line as well. Sabonis has been a guy that's given the Bucks some troubles in the past as well. He's a weird player. There's not many players like Sabonis out there. But Giannis tonight, it is fun when he takes over. But that 36 points is going to be handy for the scoring title there. But what did you think of Giannis when you're coming up against a young team? I know Sabonis is obviously a veteran. Rashawn Holmes has been around for quite a while, but he actually spent a lot of his time on Metu, who I thought had some decent moments in this game. But when you see Giannis typically against younger players, there was that one drive to the basket where he just shrugged his shoulders. Metu went flying. And it's like, the young guys just don't physically really stand a chance against Giannis.
Sorry, I was on mute there. That was a strange play because I don't know how that wasn't an and one call.
Right.
But then he ends up missing the second free throw and the ball gets tapped back to him and then he immediately lays it in. So it ended up being a 3-point play anyway. But yeah, I mean, there were definitely a number of kind of weight room moments tonight from Giannis. I thought the first half in particular, I mean, he had 14 points. It wasn't like he was like bad or something, but it just didn't feel like he was kind of operating at like, full Giannis power. I don't know if you noticed it, but early in the first quarter, I don't know if it was on a box out or on the previous play, but it looked like he was kind of grabbing his knee at one point, maybe feeling some discomfort. And I was kind of like, oh God, like, is this going to be, are we going to get the DNP knee soreness like next game? Or, obviously my first concern was just like that he can keep going in this game, but obviously he kept going through it. But yeah, the first half kind of felt like him sort of picking his spots. Didn't have any assists in the first half, I don't think. So it wasn't a big playmaking night for him. And as you said, Metu blocked him once on kind of a drive. And then it's just kind of a weird night. Like he had like a play. It looked like Sabonis might have fouled him, but he kind of missed like a chance to lefty dunk on Metu in the third quarter. And then had like just a weird, I think it was early in the fourth. He had a weird like overlay where it looked like he had a wide open layup and he just it's like he wasn't sure if he was banking it or trying to lay it straight in. And he just laid it right over the basket entirely. So definitely not like, A+ sort of Giannis night tonight, but you still saw the flashes. I mean, towards the end of the first half, he decides he's going to go coast to coast and just kind of weaves his way with the defenders. I forget who it was, if Sabonis or who it was, or maybe Trey Lyles. Just like he was trying to run back and he looked to one side and then Giannis zagged to the other side and then he just threw down the dunk with his right hand sort of off to his right as though it was just sort of like an afterthought, just yamming it in transition. So again,
Serge
just sort of
Ibaka, by the way, didn't know. He was like, "What did I just see on this dunk from Giannis?" It was a brilliant reaction.
Yeah, he was on the bench, right? He was like, he had like a like, oh my God type face. But yeah, after, I mean, he did. I think he had maybe one basket in the first like 5 minutes, and then goes to the bench as they're trying to again figure out how to get Serge and Brook staggered a little bit. But then late in the third quarter, Bucks had a good start to the third. And then they let the Kings back into it. I was like, all right, here we go. Third quarter Bucks again, blah, blah, blah. And then Giannis kind of said like, all right, F this, like I'm going to go to work here and play some bully ball. And I think he scored 12 straight points and had 28 points. Then, goes from 16 to 28 points going into the fourth quarter, gets an early layup and then adds, another 6 down the stretch. And, I thought the other one I think we need to call out, Bucks, as you said, the Bucks, it was 123, 123. And then just looking at the game log, I think was it West that hit the shot that made it 126, 123, or was it Khris? Both those guys hit big plays or big shots down the stretch. We mentioned Jrue hitting a couple as well, but I think it was Khris, right, that hit the go ahead to make it 126, 123. I'm trying to find my play-by-play, but the Bucks, bottom line, Bucks go up by 3, and then Giannis backing down goes to the hook shot, which we saw a few times in Utah. And, again, a shot that nobody's contesting with any with any real effectiveness when he's backing in and using that length, and just drops in right over the top, and that gives them the 5-point lead. And then two more steals, two more steals after that. That was the ball game. And really the only mistake of those last few minutes, I would say, Bobby Portis. They break the press there in the last, what was it, 10 or 15 seconds. Bobby Portis, 2-on-1. He's got Giannis running right down the middle of the lane. Easiest lob pass Bobby's is ever going to throw in his NBA career. Maybe the only lob pass Bobby Portis could ever throw in his NBA career. And instead he hangs on to it, gets fouled. And I don't know if he made both free throws or just one, but a little bit like, okay, Bobby, like you're hunting your own stats free throw there. Like, just give Mitchell and Ollie and the Bucks fans in Sacramento what they want. Give them the exclamation point, Giannis alley-oop dunk. That was my only complaint, my only note from the fourth quarter. But I do think it was interesting that Bud went to Bobby down the stretch because, especially with Sabonis in the game, I'd say we all would feel much better with Serge or Brook defending Sabonis down the stretch. And I thought an interesting vote of confidence to throw Bobby back in there and give him the chance to try to hold his own against Sabonis, which, I thought he was okay. I mean, it wasn't like Sabonis was just bullying him all night. I thought, as you said, Sabonis probably got some pretty good whistles on the night. But nice that they were able to figure that out. And I think the one advantage, I think the fact that with Bobby there, and I think one thing we should talk about, from a defensive standpoint, it seems like for large stretches of the season, the Bucks were sort of playing, if Bobby was blitzing, then they were mostly blitzing, right? There was that stage when they had Bobby and Boogie, and both of them were blitzing, right? And then December. And then they've gone to stages when they've switched everything, right? And they have stages where they've done more dropping, right? We did see Bobby do a lot of dropping against Bam Adebayo in that Miami game, which worked actually pretty well. But for the most part, that's not really where Bobby's going to stand out because, again, he's not that great length and rim protection that he brings. But I think one thing we've seen over the past couple of weeks, the Bucks defense has not been great, but they are playing guys to their strengths, right? So you see Bobby hedging hard, covering back. You see, obviously, Brook and Serge doing much more of dropping or playing center field where, you're not coming out really aggressively, but you're hanging back more and making the guard have to make a decision about whether they're going for the lob or a floater. And then Giannis can kind of do a little bit of everything. And so I think it's good that it seems like the Bucks have finally been, gotten to the point where, like, all right, we've mastered or gotten comfortable enough with all these different things that we're going to now vary it depending on the personnel we have, depending on the situation. And, I think there's an argument for, first off, I think you need to give NBA teams different looks, right? If you just do the same thing every play throughout a 8-minute game, NBA teams are really good. They're going to adjust. They're going to do different things. They're going to be able to take advantage of you no matter how good your individual defensive players are. And so, maybe part of the calculus was as well, like, hey, we want to give those Sacramento guards more to think about and maybe take the ball out of their hands by hedging hard and kind of forcing them to retreat a bit and not just be able to dribble into a floater or dribble in towards, a drive where they can maybe kick it out or whatever. So I don't know. Again, I don't think the Bucks pick and roll defense has, that they figured everything out. I think Bud is putting guys in the best situations possible for them for the most part with some of the coverages. Obviously on a night like this, nice to see the fact that they are able to close with Bobby. Is that what they're going to do most nights? I don't know. It's nice that Bud's going to have the option to go with Brook, but obviously tonight went with Bobby. And even though Bobby was, not a big force offensively, they were able to obviously get the stops, and they had the mobility defensively to create some havoc, double the ball, throw some extra bodies, and then force the Kings to make some mistakes.
This was the big thing when we go back to a couple of seasons ago when we were going into the playoffs, and it's like, well, we just haven't really seen the Bucks do anything else. What happens if Brook Lopez is off the floor? Well, I guess we'll bring in Marvin Williams, but he's also going to be playing drop. Like this is what the conversations that we were having on this podcast as we went to the playoffs. We saw last year that lineup versatility and being able to do some different things. Clearly, something you need if you want to have a long playoff run. By the way, after tonight, Joel Embiid is at 29.9 points per game, and Giannis is at 29.8. But you can check out, you can bet on the scoring title if you want at BetOnline betonline.net. You can check all the latest odds, contests, and player props. Betonline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. Obviously, college basketball tournament is underway. Apparently, there was some crazy stuff going on tonight. Of course, I was watching the Bucks game, but BetOnline, you can find all the scores, the podcasts, and the news this season. And it's not just basketball, though. Baseball's coming back. Football will be back here before we know it. Vegas casino games, it's all there. So head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. I did find it interesting tonight, and you spoke about the defense, and, it's interesting with Brook Lopez. Alvin Gentry has been the number one man for a number of years now, publicly calling out Brook Lopez defense as very, very illegal. Let's just say that. And I remember being there at a press conference pregame when he really went on about it. Then Eric wrote a great story that I believe that he retweeted tonight as well. So if you haven't read it, you can go back and read it. But I remember being at that press conference and Gentry, and it was almost like, and at that time they had Anthony Davis. I mean, the team was like decent, and I think he was at New Orleans. Sorry, I should say. So I believe at that point, he was trying to really call on the officials to look at Brook Lopez. But as the story that Eric did with Brook really perfectly outlines, is that even though you may think that he's skirting around the rules, they can't really call 3 seconds of him. And I tweeted a clip from the game tonight. And I think that when you look at Brook Lopez, and if you just spend possessions watching his positioning, what he does, where he goes, who he touches, it's honestly quite masterful. And I think that this is the biggest addition, even with Serge Ibaka, who we do think is obviously a better rim protector than Bobby. And I guess historically he's a better defender than Bobby Portis, no doubt. But Brook Lopez still feels he's come into this team. And I was watching him on a few possessions tonight where he's just completely in control, in the right position. Even if he is backing back under the rim, he will be able to still contest that floater and then and then box out for the rebound as well. So, I think overall most Bucks fans with Brook Lopez in the floor just feel a higher level of comfort about what this team can potentially do defensively. But tonight it was a 116 defensive rating, and you did tweet out this chart, and I think it was just to do with open threes from the opposition. And we always come back to this, and I know some people don't like it when you talk about luck and you talk about percentages and all this sort of stuff. But what did you see in regards to opposition and wide open 3-point shots?
Yeah, so I was on Real GM, and someone was like, I saw some posts about somebody saying like, well, it's obvious because the Bucks defense has gotten worse because, and I forget the logic they're saying, oh, that because they're playing more drop now, and that's like, oh, well, now they're playing more drop, so their defense is worse. And it's just like, I mean, first off, there's like, a lot of things happen over the course of the season. The Bucks had a really easy schedule the first couple months. We've talked about, obviously, the schedule over the last month in particular has been a lot harder. So, I mean, you expect the defensive rating to be worse just because of the level of the quality of the opponent that you're playing against. But one thing I always do whenever I'm looking at like lineup data, I always take a look at the opponent shooting numbers, the opponent 3-point percentages in particular, because if it's like really high or really low, then I always sort of take a note like, okay, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. Or, if you're a great defense and you're allowing 40% opponent 3-point shooting, like, oh, wow, like then you're doing everything else right. But so I just wanted to look at it because we talk a lot about opponent 3-point percentage, but truly the best measure of luck is wide open 3-point percentage, right? Because, there's really not anything the defense can do. You could say like, oh, well, you're allowing the worst guys to shoot more open threes, right? And I think there was some discussion a few years ago when the Bucks defense was kind of first breaking in and, playing at this really high level that they tended to give up wide open threes to like big guys and guys that maybe aren't as good. So maybe there was a little bit of tactical acumen to the lower 3-point percentage that they allowed. But last year they had really bad 3-point percentage luck, and they were still, whatever it was 10th or something in defense. This year they had great defensive, great 3-point luck through the first couple months, and now it's kind of really worked against them. Now I think that last time I checked Cleaning Glass, they were about like average in terms of opponent 3-point percentage. So a lot of it's kind of worked back, and there's not like some huge variance. But if you look at wide open 3-point percentage allowed, there's been a lot of swing, and they're still, I think, like top 5 in terms of opponent 3-point percentage. So they've still been somewhat lucky there. I think they're like 35.5% this year. I think they're around 40% last year, which, again, when you give up 43 pointers a game, if you're talking about a 5%, swing, that's real. Like that's more 3-pointers per game. That's 6 points, right? And yeah, it's not exactly 6 points because if you miss, you can still get an offensive rebound, blah, blah, blah. But those are real swings. And so I just wanted to kind of look at, the wide open 3-point percentage over the course of the season. And sure enough, you see it, I think it was November, they're like at 30% allowed. And the last 2 months, it's been like 41, 42% wide open 3-point percentage allowed, even though they've actually been allowing fewer opponent wide open 3-pointers. So you'd say, well, the silver lining is here, you're allowing fewer wide open threes. That's good. Normally the Bucks are around like 20 wide open threes per game allowed. Last couple of months they've been, I think we're more like 18 or so. But teams are making, them at a really high rate. And so overall, I'd say, well, look, it all comes out in the wash over the course of a season. Maybe you're playing better teams, so they're, more skillful teams shooting. It's just kind of the way it's going to work out. But again, I would say like, I kind of looked at it, right? And look, there's the whole thing of correlation, causation. You don't want to like say, oh, all the Bucks defensive issues have been just because of bad luck or something like that. But if you do just those two numbers, the defensive rating and you do the wide open 3-point percentage allowed, the correlation between those is like 0.9, right? So it's like they've moved in lockstep more or less over the course of the 6 months of the season. And so, yes, there are absolutely other things at play, but given that you've had mostly a lot of roster stability, you haven't had Brook Lopez basically all year, and you've had intermittent losses of like Jrue and Khris and Giannis over the course of the season, but you haven't had wild irregularity in terms of your roster. I think it's pretty telling that those two things are so closely correlated. And so, again, I get it. Everybody wants to say that it's because this or that, whatever. I'd say the two obvious things, when you look at the defense, one, opponents, it's just been a harder schedule. And two, teams are just making more threes. And, those wide open threes, again, maybe it was going in your favor early in the season. Now it's going against you. And that's just kind of the way things go. So it's not to say the Bucks can't get better, because I would say even if you regress them to the mean, they're not where they want to be. They still have a defensive rating that is not great. But again, just in terms of like thinking that like, oh, they were good early in the season, like, no, they haven't been great all year long. And we've talked about the distribution as well, compared to last year and certainly compared to a couple of years ago. They're allowing more threes and marginally more shots at the rim as well. And perhaps most importantly, a higher percentage allowed at the rim. And that's been probably another big issue since the All-Star break, is just the field goal percentage allowed at the rim, which again, hopefully that will start to get better here now that the fact that you are playing so big, only logical that you'd have a little more luck there. But other thing too is this, I think it's Kevin Pelton tweeted, this is like the best offensive month in like, I don't know if it's history or like forever, basically. So team, it's not just individual. We've seen some monster individual scoring games. It's also just teams are scoring at a super high rate now. Bucks are obviously one of those. And again, it's just, it has never been harder to be an NBA defense. And obviously the Bucks have been able to figure it out when they have needed to late in games here, obviously last year during the playoffs. But still, I would say a work in progress.
Yeah, the Bucks right now, 4th in offense, they're 14th in defense, and then net rating, they're 7th. But yeah, no doubt, individually, there's been some ridiculous numbers. Make sure you check out the Locked On NBA podcast, the national podcast on the network. Especially make sure you do that on Friday, because we have got a huge slate of NBA basketball coming up today. One game, the Detroit Pistons versus the Orlando Magic. Can I just like, what is that, because it's the first day of the tournament or something like that? Why is there one game, and why is it Detroit and Orlando? That is disgusting, Frank.
That's a white flag. That is a television white flag if I ever saw one.
Yeah, I think so. Very strange. I thought my app was glitching. But anyway, the Bucks have got 2 days off. They're 44-26 now. As we already mentioned, still a couple games back of Miami. Pretty good feedback from the podcast we had yesterday in terms of what you think the Bucks should do. And I will say most Bucks fans are just like, screw it. We are the champs. We will beat anyone, anywhere. I don't care. Which, by the way, I really respect that type of attitude. So we'll leave it there. We'll have another podcast tomorrow. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that. I mean, like, especially right now, like, again, we're getting close to the end of the season, but it's so congested in terms of the standings. It's really hard to like game this system at this point.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the last weekend of the season, right, where teams might rest anyway, that's where I think, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I think the Sixers, I was looking at theirs, I think they end on a back-to-back. we'll see what happens, right? I mean, they could, all these teams could very easily argue like, well, we're trying to rest our guys, like we're not worried about seeding, blah blah blah, right? Sort of couch the sort of playoff seed tanking that way. But as you guys talked about, as we've talked about, I don't think the Bucks are going to really change the way that they attack this. I think they're going to put their health first, right? I think you're going to see probably some resting here over the next week. They actually have a very nice schedule as far as obviously the 2 days off here before the Saturday game. And then they have another 2 days off before they play the Bulls on Tuesday at home. So the resting is not an issue here in the short term, but at some point, I think they will try to figure out how they keep those guys fresh. And the other kind of complicating component too is, and you guys touched on it, but it's one thing if you try to game it when under the old system where you knew that the team finishing 7th is going to play the 2 and the team that finishes first will play the 8. We don't know what's going to happen, right? With the play-in tournament now, especially if Toronto is the 7 seed and if Brooklyn is the 8 seed, they lost on a near buzzer beater to Spencer Dinwiddie tonight against the Mavs. Going into Toronto is obviously extra interesting if the Nets end up in the 8 spot with Toronto 7, because obviously Kyrie is not going to be able to play in Toronto due to the COVID restrictions there. And I haven't gotten the sense that there's any foreseeable scenario where those would get relaxed ahead of the playoffs. Obviously, I don't think officials in Toronto are begging the NBA or begging the provincial whoever's, or I don't even know if it's a national thing or what, but I don't think any basketball people are begging them to relax that, given the real only impact would be on Kyrie Irving. So we obviously understand why there's a lot of pressure happening in New York right now. But hey, KD versus the Raptors in a 1-game playoff for the 7 seed in Toronto, I'd still feel pretty good if you're Kevin Durant, but it's probably kind of a toss-up at that point. So again, like you try to game the system, who knows what happens. And I mean, you look like right behind you. I mean, the Celtics blew out the Warriors tonight in I was gonna say Oakland, not Oakland, in the Bay Area. So they're still only 2 losses back. The Bulls obviously have been fading a little bit. They lost again. They're also now 2 losses back and kind of percentage points behind the Celtics. So it seems like, I would say, Bucks, Sixers, Celtics, seem like the group that's going to be somewhere in that 2 to 4 range. I was looking at the Basketball Reference projections. They actually have the Bucks as the favorites to finish in the 2 spot, which is interesting given the schedule that we've talked about has been difficult for the Bucks. But it's actually, I think they have the 4th hardest schedule now in the East behind Boston, Chicago, Boston, and I think Charlotte, I think was the other one. So playing all these road games against good teams has obviously gotten a lot out of the way. So yeah, I mean, right now we'll see what happens. They have, some really difficult games coming up. I would not be surprised if the Bucks drop to 4th. I would be surprised if they drop to 5th, just because that I think would mean that you're dropping behind the Bulls, which again, they have 2 games left against them. I just feel like the Bulls probably are just not in as good a place right now, but we'll see. I mean, I don't think you're super worried if you're the Bucks in any of those slots. If you're the 3 and you're playing like Cleveland or potentially Toronto, because that's the other thing too. Toronto is now only a half game back of the Cavs, who lost tonight to the Sixers. So very possible that Cleveland is now that 7 seed. So yeah, still a lot of time left in terms of playoff positioning.
Well, we're all up to date now. That's for sure, Frank. I thought you were going to make it. And by the way, we've been podcasting for long enough for me to know this, but I thought you were just going to cut in with one little quick point here, and then you basically went through every possible scenario.
I was going all through the playoff probabilities on Basketball Reference today. So I'm going to brain dump that since I'm not going to pod anymore this week. No,
we love it. But we will podcast tomorrow. Someone will podcast tomorrow. I'll be talking tomorrow.
I'm not positive. I'm going to try to go to sleep before 12:30 at night.
Yeah, good call. But the good news is this final road game, even though it's a more friendly time zone for everyone living in Milwaukee anyway, it's an afternoon game. Saturday I guess it's 4 p.m. It's a weird time slot for that game against the Wolves there. But obviously, we'll wrap that up next week. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll leave it there for Frank, myself. Catch you guys tomorrow.